Tucker Carlson just blasted Trump and Congress for funding Israel's genocide in Gaza. And that's not it. In this clip with Andrew Napolitano, he also rakes the political establishment over the coals for the U.S.'s attachment to Israel and rips two specific things, one coming from a prominent Democrat and one coming from a prominent Republican. So let's see him eat into this Israel first mentality. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Do you think that Donald Trump understands that in order to please the donor class, he's funding genocide in Gaza? You talk about killing innocents. This is the slaughter of tens of thousands of innocent people.
And not an accidental slaughter. So you often hear people say, well, in war, innocents die, which is obviously true. It's one of the reasons I think we should think very carefully before joining any war, because the effects are far beyond what they're advertised to be. But this is very different in that, and we know this from the public statements of Israeli cabinet ministers, the point is to make the people who live there, the indigenous occupants, leave so their land can be taken, and killing their children and their women and their parents and their grandparents, killing them on purpose, is in service of that goal. So this is not accidental. This is the intentional murder of innocents in order to achieve a goal, which is the theft of land. But whatever the goal is, we can never take the side of the murder of innocents. We are officially opposed to murdering innocents, period. And when we kill innocents by accident, we admit it. We apologize. If we think it was intentional, we punish the person, including countless U.S. soldiers over the years who've been court-martialed and imprisoned, in some cases executed, for killing innocents in war. That's why we say we're better. And if we sign up for that program and pay for it and endorse it and hurt anyone who criticizes it, which we have done, then how are we not the same morally as the jihadis we claim to hate? And of course, we're not.
Right. Well said. This is incredibly well said. Of course, Tucker's exactly right. The modern U.S. foreign policy regimen is a mass murder machine. That's why it's the worst government program, because not only is it based on a spendthrift attitude that confounds inflation and exacerbate debt, it also is a mass murder machine. Beyond it, it has more moral issues than misallocation of funds on domestic programs, for instance. It results in the mass murder of innocents, which is Israel's genocide in Gaza. Over 100,000 dead there. It's hard to know the exact numbers. Some people think it's north of that by a large stretch. There's a lot of missing people that are unaccounted for. And this is exactly right. It's not accidental. And you can't justify it by saying they're all Hamas. Even by Israel's own data, and a database that was leaked a few months ago proves that 83% of the people killed in Gaza are civilians. They're not Islamic Jihad or Hamas. And that's taking Israel's data. So I'm so glad this is Tucker's viewpoint. He's exactly correct here.
I'm chuckling thinking of your interview with Ted Cruz, where he actually told you that God the Father gave Israel to Benjamin Netanyahu. And then, of course, you asked him where he could find it in the Bible, and he was not as literate as you, I'm being charitable, in his reading of the scripture. But isn't Donald Trump funding genocide, as Joe Biden did, to please the donor class?
Well, strictly speaking, the U.S. Congress is funding it enthusiastically, right. But I think for sure the executive branch seems to be behind this. I don't think everyone in there is, but I would just say, look, the obvious point, which is we all get carried away. We're all prisoners of the moment we live in. It's happened to me throughout my life. You could find tape of me saying the problem is Muslims. The problem is Islam. I can't even believe I said something like that. The problem is not a religion. The problem is individuals. The problem is a certain ideology. It's clearly not all Muslims. Is it all Indonesians? Really? But I said that. Why did I say that? I'm ashamed of saying that. And I've apologized. Let me apologize again for saying that. Just is that if I ever said it's all Jews because I don't like Mark Levin, it's all Jew. That's a disgusting thing to say. But I've said that about Muslims. So all of us are prisoners of whatever hysteria surrounds us. We're influenced by it. And I think a lot of decent people have been carried away to a point where they're defending what is genocide in Gaza. But it doesn't mean there won't be massive consequences for the country, for their souls, honestly. You can't do that. You need to repent of that. You need to say, I'm sorry I did that. You have to do that, or you imperil like yourself eternally, but you also risk destroying your own country. And that's exactly where we are. And we all
That's exactly right. This is where it's all going to, and I'm so glad he's making this argument. I think it's the most compelling argument for conservatives to hear this, by the way, to oppose collective judgment, because so often that's what the liberal establishment did in terms of DEI schemes and affirmative action and all sorts of programs like that that Republicans always wanted to have nothing to do with. But this is the same sort of flavor of that, to say, you know, these subjugated Palestinians are essentially less than human. We can justify whatever Israel wants to do to them, however much money it takes, you know, just bankroll this in addition to a new war with Iran for a month-long bombing stretch in Yemen to allow them to bomb Qatar, another U.S. ally. But the hierarchy of allies in the Middle East always results in Israel at the top, and Israel never pays for its misdeeds in this way. And then you just have all these pathetic things in which Trump stands up there and he defends Miriam Adelson and her attachment to Israel, which he said and boasted about might be closer than her attachment to her own country. And I say that in quotes because Israel's her real own country. And Trump deserves culpability for this. There's no doubt about it. He allowed Netanyahu to break the first ceasefire that he arranged as he stepped into the Oval Office. And again, were there any ramifications for Israel at that point? Any aid withdrawn? Any actual lambasting of Netanyahu? Not whatsoever. The policy never changes because AIPAC is so entrenched, as is the military-industrial complex, which loves genocides like this because it profits off it lucratively through a state collusion scheme with these big firms, whereupon they benefit due to state war-making.
Also need to call out like true radicalism. Laura Loomer, who has like a press pass to the Pentagon, yesterday said we need more Meir Kahanas, okay, the founder of the Jewish Defense League, who was a convicted terrorist. I'm not throwing this around like, oh, he's a terrorist. He was literally a terrorist.
Correct.
He was murdered in 1990, but under U.S. law, he was a terrorist. He admitted he was convicted twice for bombing people. He admitted he did it. So he was exactly what we say we're fighting against. He was a terrorist, killing innocents to make a political point or achieve a political end. And here you have Laura Loomer endorsing him openly. You've Lindsey Graham saying on tape, if you don't do what Israel wants, God will kill you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so ridiculous and just so abhorrent to see prominent politicians say that. Brian Mast saying that there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian. For Randy Fine to say we need to nuke Gaza twice. And I sleep quite well knowing that dead Palestinian children are being killed, as he did on Twitter. And it's not just this in isolation. There were other terrorists, in fact, that served as prime ministers of Israel. Menachem Begin, the founder of the Likud party, Netanyahu's party and part of his right-wing coalition there, he founded Irgun, which played a role in the bombing of the King David Hotel in, I think, 46. A literal terrorist became a prime minister of Israel, and the U.S. remains attached to a terrorist regime. Terrorism swept through Israel in the 40s before the establishment of a Palestinian state. There were acts of terrorism against mandatory Palestine, which at that point was British ruled. So that's what you get from this Israel first rigid Zionist mentality. It's present from the start of the modern inception of Israel.
You have Mike Huckabee saying exactly the same thing. America will be destroyed unless we follow the lead of Benjamin Netanyahu. This is true extremism. This is what I didn't like about ISIS. It's what I disapproved of with Al-Qaeda. That's why I don't like jihadis. I really don't like any of that. No American should. And all of a sudden, it's flowering in our country. And these are not small people. Mike Huckabee is the U.S. ambassador to Israel. Lindsey Graham is the senior senator from South Carolina. Laura Loomer is all over the executive branch as like an advisor. Like, you can't have this. You have to say that this is wrong. It's getting too crazy. We're going to wind up with real violence if people keep talking this way.
So
we sure are, but it's a problem of the system and who Trump's donors are, who he's beholden to. Miriam Adelson gave him $100 million. Of course, you're going to end up with Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, Mike Waltz as the National Security Advisor for a while. Now it's Marco Rubio, so it's still two neocons, and both of the two probably most prominent and powerful foreign policy positions. You have Laura Loomer walking around the Pentagon, one of the most bloodthirsty Zionist freaks in the world. Mike Huckabee, who meets with Jonathan Pollard, a convicted Israeli spy. You get all of this because of the attachment to Israel. It's AIPAC's power and domineering playing a role here. Trump is guilty as anyone of facilitating it, and is in fact probably the most pro-Israel president ever. And I say that in the worst possible respect, because it's horrible for our country.
Why did the Congress give Benjamin Netanyahu 56 standing ovations in a 58-minute speech? Is it because their campaigns are funded by AIPAC?
It's such a tough question. I had the smartest conversation, deepest conversation I ever had about this was with Jeff Sachs, who I know is your friend and mine. Right. And he said, yeah, it's the money. Of course, there is blackmail. There are threats. That's all real. It's real the world over. It's not just Israel. It does that, by the way. Of course not. Lots of different countries do that. Lots of different lobbies do that. But there's something deeper. There's like almost a spell. I mean, Huckabee, for example. You really think Huckabee is being threatened? Huckabee's being paid?
No, Mike is more the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. than he is the U.S. ambassador to Israel. Of course.
He's exactly that. And that really just demonstrates the type of dynamic this is, this toxic and dark relationship with Israel. It's not an alliance. It's one-sided, where Israel exercises influence in our government, not the other way around. Even though it's our government being fleeced, our civilians being fleeced, taxpayers, to fund them during a genocide for war. And we don't get to exercise any influence in their government. It seems like it's only in the other direction. It's just so pernicious. It needs to be called out. I'm so glad people on the right are finally waking up to it. And the remaining neocon Zionist holdouts need to be lambasted for it. I'm glad that Tucker is doing that, as is Andrew Napolitano, both of which are right-wing, by the way. Napolitano's right-wing libertarian, and Tucker Carlson's more of a right-wing paleocon to some extent. But this is a good dynamic, man, because this is going to change our political system as we know it gradually, as so many people lose their attachment to this rogue regime that doesn't benefit us in any way.
You know,
but he's become a zealot.
See ads on Newsmax that Mike makes while he's the U.S. ambassador for selling Israel First trinkets.
It's right. So it's so degrading to the office, to the State Department, to the U.S. government, to all of us as Americans, to have someone like Huckabee advocating for a foreign country as he's supposed to be advocating for ours. Like, that is degrading. But then you have to, I know Huckabee well, I'm sure you do too.
Yes.
Nice man. Like, what is this? And I look at him and I see a man under a spell. I mean this, and I'll be mocked for it, but I mean it. I think, and that's what Jeff Sachs, who's a pretty secular guy, I think, but he said, I've watched this for 40 years. There's no practical, conventional explanation for some of this behavior. I mean, I look at Ted Cruz and I'm like, I think I know what's going on. Lindsey Graham, I think I know what's going on. But Mike Huckabee, I think he is under a spell. He is not thinking clearly at all. And so when Mike Huckabee says, and I think Mike Huckabee likes America, or did, but when he stands up and says, God will destroy our country if we don't support Bibi, it's like, how could someone ever say something like that? And I don't know the answer, but I think it's more metaphysical than political.
Yeah, you have to be under some kind of enchantment, some religious, rigid dogma to believe that. After all that we've seen with this relationship with Israel, all the wars it's dragged us into, how many calamities that's meant for U.S. soldiers in these wars, in Libya and Syria, in Iraq, and, in Yemen, and in this new war in Iran. The war on terror in general, much of it has been due to Israeli desire to involve us in regime change. That's what the clean break strategy is all about. We've talked about that a lot, and how it broke from the Oslo strategy of the 1990s, all the debt and inflation that it's caused. And Huckabee is just a traitor. He just is. It wouldn't meet the dictionary definition of treason, because Israel is ostensibly an ally, but they're certainly an enemy to anyone looking at this. And it's just so plain. and in so plain terms that you see this playing out, and it's just so humiliating every single time.
Well, you talk about embracing felons. He embraced Jonathan Pollard, who
It's
is the
unbelievable.
greatest stealer of American secrets in the history of the United States of America. And he stole them and gave them to Israel. And when he got out of jail, he had certain confinements imposed upon him. Trump commuted those confinements. Sheldon Adelson flew him to Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu greeted him. Now Mike greets him in the American embassy. A guy who probably cost American lives by exposing the names of American agents.
And what's so insulting about that in particular, and I'm so glad Judge is raising this, is that after that happened, you might have thought, oh man, this is a big PR blunder that the White House is going to have to explain away. And instead of doing that, I think Carolyn Leavitt said, the White House and the president stands with its ambassador, meaning that they didn't give a crap. You can just, humiliate the country, rob us of our sovereignty, and not even explain this in any fashion, because most Americans don't pay attention to these things, but it really just demonstrates how much above scrutiny these people act. Like, what in the world makes you think that meeting with Pollard would not be controversial for those of us looking every single time, seeing all these absurd connections to Israel, prioritizing Israel over us, including convicted spies that betrayed their own country? They didn't even think it was worthy of trying to explain away. That is, the most just embarrassing thing about this whole thing. And we're just supposed to pretend like there's nothing wrong with this. Like, this is just how things go. Unfortunately, it is, but I'm going to complain about it.
And what happened? What did Israel do with those secrets? And it wasn't just this, not like Julian Assange, Ed Snowden stuff. These were actually national secrets.
It did two
things.
Gave
them to the Soviet Union.
Correct. It further developed the security around its nuclear weapons, because these secrets were how America spies on other countries, and it probably sold it to the old Soviet Union. That's one of the reasons the government was so animated in its prosecution. I like the little guy. I usually side for the defendant in these criminal cases. Not in this case. The evidence of his guilt was overwhelming. The harm was manifest. And then the United States ambassador treats him royally.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's no comparison between heroes like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden and supervillains like Jonathan Pollard, who wasn't a whistleblower. He was just engaging in literal espionage, but he did it to the right country, right? That's why he can be treated as royalty by the Adelsons, by Netanyahu kissing the ground after departing from Adelson's private plane when he was eventually released, serving out his sentence. And Trump pardoned his handler, by the way, on the last day of his first term. Barely makes any kind of headway in terms of what people talk about in this episode, but that shows Trump's attachment to this too. And we're just supposed to, again, pretend that there's nothing wrong with this. Well, I say there is something wrong with this. I'm glad that there's a mass noticing on the right now with Tucker Carlson completely lambasting this relationship. Even sometimes saying, like, I like Israel, but it's the government of Israel I have a problem with, obviously. That alone is good. And maybe that doesn't go far enough for some people. I would say, this attachment in general, all of the governments of Israel have been bad. And, go further than that. But he calls it a genocide. That is groundbreaking, man. Just imagine the most prominent conservative spokesman 10 years ago calling what Israel has done to Gaza a genocide. It just wouldn't happen. And Marjorie Taylor Greene was the first congresswoman to call it that. Even the Squad and, the prominent progressive liberals in Congress didn't do that. Didn't stick their neck out with courage to do that. I think since some of them have, and Bernie Sanders has. But even just calling it that shows where these people are. It shows they're not cowards. They're willing to stand up for what's right, not only for humanitarian reasons, but also reasons of national sovereignty. You should only care about the priorities of your constituents. That's how our system's supposed to work. Of course, it's not that way. It's not people in, South Carolina that Lindsey Graham actually cares about. It's actually just the lobbyists and Lockheed Martin and Boeing and Raytheon and AIPAC. And AIPAC does have a lot of pull on politicians. It doesn't register that way in terms of overall money spent compared to other lobbies, but how AIPAC operates is actually kind of brilliant, because what they do is they maintain donor records and donor information such that they don't have to get on the books a lot of just individual AIPAC donations to politicians when there are challengers and rivals in politicians' districts to the politicians they support. They just go through their information and call individual donors and get those donors to donate the money directly themselves as individual donations, bypassing a lot of the scrutiny they would get even on top of the scrutiny they get now. So that's how they operate. But Tucker's exactly right. This is just the most twisted and worst decision for the U.S. to continue on this course. As people are fading away, especially in lower age groups, just turning away from this Israel first mentality in record numbers, it's something that gives me a lot of hope and encouragement, and I sure hope it continues. I don't think it's really going to affect the 2026 or 2028 election cycles, but I'd sure love to be proven wrong on that. So as far as I see it, Tucker Carlson made great arguments here. I'm so glad that he is not only putting blame on Congress, but also the president for this. He's calling it a genocide and pointing out the twisted behavior, both in terms of people like Chuck Schumer, but also like Lindsey Graham and Mike Huckabee, and the people that treat this foreign country as if that is their priority. And even people that don't pay attention to Israel or foreign policy that much, I think more and more are seeing this, is that their interests aren't being served. Why? Because of Israel? Well, a lot of those people had no reason to not like Israel or turn against Israel, but they see how these politicians treat it, and it's just too weird, too concerning, and too lacking in the proper priorities. That's what you get. But what do you guys think? Do you think Tucker Carlson's right about this? What is it going to take to break the U.S. attachment to Israel? I want you guys to let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Andrew Napolitano. Great interview, great segments. The whole thing was awesome. And if you like this video, please consider joining as a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button below. And if you do that, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. You'll be able to see those members-only videos right away if you do. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. That'll send you off to a website. You just plug in your email, and then I'll send you a PDF copy of that book free of charge, just because I appreciate you watching. And then until I see you guys next time, our demands here are simple. No more wars, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.
The Israelis were definitely involved. Ehud Barak is living at his house. I mean, okay. And we have a lot of his emails that prove that, and I'm not defending the Israeli government, which is hard to defend. It's pretty clear who some of the players were. They were governments, the U.S. government involved, British government involved, Israeli government involved. If we're honest, we already know that. So, I mean, I'm completely for disclosure of everything.
Israel had an undeniable role in Epstein's crimes. We know that, and Tucker Carlson is saying that here, explaining why he believes that, who else was involved, and why there's so much more to this story under the surface that hasn't been covered. So let's watch. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
There's a lot of these people walking around, and I just know a handful of them. And then you look at the politics, and look at this shit, the Epstein files. It's a hoax. It's a hoax. It's a national security threat. They're fake. This is what the fuck, man? The American people are fucking screaming at you, screaming that they want this shit released. Yeah. Congress, I don't even know the number. What is it like? I can't remember. How many people are in Congress?
535 Senate plus House. 435 in the House.
Everybody except one person.
Yep.
I don't know. Who is the one person?
Some guy.
Yeah. But, and so back to earlier, we want to make an impact. We want to tell the truth. We want to, do these, and we had a big influence in the last election. Seemed like a great thing.
Did it matter?
At the time, it felt great. Did it Was that a good thing?
You can't.
Now we got a guy who's, oh, America first, all this other fucking bullshit. And everybody is screaming, release these fucking files. We want to know what is going on. We want to know.
What will we find out if they were all released? Anything we didn't know?
Honestly, I have no idea. Is it the end of the fucking country? Like, is it really that bad?
C.S. Lewis has this. Well, I have tons of opinions on the subject. I don't have, concrete proof. But of course, I think I know. But C.S. Lewis has this. I think it was C.S. Lewis has this essay in which he says, people debate, was Jesus really God or whatever. If Jesus came back to Earth tomorrow and held a press conference, like a week later, people would be talking about something else. It's like, we actually know what's true. We know what's true. And the way that dogs know what's true, you can't reason with a dog. The dog can smell it. And he sticks with his opinion because he has no other input.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some truth to that, but of course we need to know the details because we need to know the names connected to this thing. This thing that was probably an Israeli blackmail operation manifesting as this child sex trafficking ring that prominent people were involved in. So no matter how harmful that is to certain subsections of the political class, tribe A, tribe B, I think it's more likely to be harmful to both tribes, and really they seem like a singular uniparty tribe most of the time. Americans want answers. It's not to say that people wouldn't try to bury that or forget about it. It probably would, but it would also decipher the corruption at the core of the government, which is really important to us dissidents who want that corruption to be put forward, for there to be transparency so that people on the outside, maybe political laymen, maybe people that don't have a particular disposition toward politics, can see things as we do and know things as we know. That would be an important way to do it. The guy who voted against the Epstein Files release was Clay Higgins from Louisiana. I can't wait to be seeing what his constituents in his district in Louisiana say about that. I wouldn't want to be him defending covering up a child sex trafficking ring and Epstein's crimes and the documents, especially when the victims are standing for release. And even Trump relented in the end.
If you hate a dog, you can't talk your way out of it. The dog knows you hate the dog because dogs have unerring instincts, and so do we. And so, of course, we know exactly what the Epstein story is about. It's about the deep corruption of global leadership, of course. And you can say it's about Israel, it's about the CIA. Well, it's about, is there a distinction, really?
No. There doesn't seem to be a distinction between the CIA and Israel, or in particular Mossad these days, that's for sure.
Not just between Israel and Mossad and CIA, but about the British government, or really kind of any government, or any, Bill Gates or Leon Black. It's all kind of varieties of the same thing. It's corrupt leadership that is acting on its own behalf against the interests of the people they lead. It's the oldest story there is. It's the Pharisees. And if we're honest, we already know that. So, I'm completely for disclosure of everything, but I don't lie to myself and say that disclosure would change human nature, because it won't. And people have an opportunity to exploit others, generally will. And the rest of us need to fight daily against that, not because we're going to win in the short term, but because it is our duty and to serve what's good and true.
Yeah, I'll disagree with them to some extent. I think a true release, and by the way, I mean by that a true release, not unlimited redactions and classified documents that never see the light of day, which will happen, by the way. A real release, I do think, would change the way multitudes of Americans would see the government, would see who has been involved in these crimes, where the money trails came from, which person on each side of this was involved, how deep this goes into the underbelly of the bureaucracy, the legal community, of the business community. I think Americans, many of them, would change their perceptions to government in the same way that many Americans' perceptions toward government changed in light of the COVID regime. They'll never be the same again after withstanding that gaslight campaign, after they withstood the CIA involvement in the JFK assassination. Probable CIA involvement in that changed people's mindsets. It's not going to change the entire populace, but I do think that would change a lot of people's mindsets, and that's why there has been this cover-up. It's really the only thing to explain the cover-up.
Period, even if we're killed doing it. So I don't know. I mean, I won't stop pushing for disclosure. I really believe that. Trust is built on honesty. It's not built on lies, ever.
You know, you say, you know, does it change? I think I can't remember your exact verbiage, but you know, we were talking about, you know, when this gets exposed, does it change anything? No, this is the nature of man. This is what happens. But
we already know the answer.
Men need to be reset, and men have not been fucking reset, not in this country, for a long time.
That's coming, whether we want it or not. We don't want it, but it's coming.
And
all this shit about women don't need men. You've obviously seen chaos in a society, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like actual chaos. People just like shoot into buildings and no one arrests them. Mm-hmm. You spent your life around that stuff. Those societies don't ask questions like, what are men for? You know what I mean? Right. And we're, of course, moving closer to that. And all.
Yeah, I mean, that does seem to be a novelty push. I don't focus on much of those issues on this channel, but that is a way to divide people against each other. And it seems to be coming from a regime that wants us squabbling with our neighbors on those cultural lines that they don't really care about. They would care if we joined together against them on the financial corruption and on the wars and on the Epstein stuff, joining with people we otherwise might disagree with on immigration and, you know, guns and abortion and the culture war and stuff like that. But definitely they have a concern when it comes to what we would align on that would disrupt their stranglehold on power over us.
All of this, all of our silliest manifestations, you know, the trans craziness or feminism or other just revolts against nature are only possible because we live in this nerf world of affluence. But as that starts to change, and it is changing, then the upside of that, we're going to get poorer and the society will become more dangerous, but we'll also be a little more rooted in reality. In the same way that rich people are insufferable, not all, but a lot of rich people are insufferable because they're detached from reality, from nature, from God, from like the things that are real, and they convince themselves because they can fly from point to point without going through TSA that they have infinite power, and they don't, and that's why they're so hard to have dinner with. But a normal society doesn't have these problems, has all kinds of other problems, but doesn't have the American problems of like, you know, I'm a 40-year-old unmarried Citibank executive. I'll just get a surrogate. It's like, okay. For the suicide rate, there's not a lot of suicide in, you know, impoverished countries because like the mission is really clear. Eat.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some truth to this. I also think this is essentially a government program that's not totally organic. We saw this pushed from the early 2010s to the mid-2010s when you saw the culture war come in and disrupt the Venn diagram of kind of alignment. There was some between the Tea Party movement and Occupy talking about the financial corruption in government, especially in regard to the TARP bailouts. That was a little bit before the early 2010s. But this is when you saw a mass injection of trans issues, war on women, you know, racism, sexism, homophobia. And if you don't believe me, this isn't just anecdotal. You can go on LexisNexis and do searches. Those words come up in a firestorm of explosivity in those years. It was injected into the consciousness of Americans so that Americans would fight over those issues, rather than fighting them on the empire building schemes and the corporate welfare schemes and the deep state corruption. I think that is responsible.
You know, there's not a lot of crisis of meaning in Burundi. You know what I mean?
It's a fight for the day.
Yeah, it's a fight for the day. Well, it's a trade-off. I mean, I would much rather live in a DoorDash society because I like comfort and ease and everything, but it is a trade-off, and you trade comfort for meaning. That's just kind of what we've done, and we shouldn't be surprised by it.
What do you think happens, honestly? If this, do you think this is actually is this gonna come out?
Yep.
Or has it all been shredded? I mean, you know, Mark
I
Epstein
don't.
said this is.
Of course. I mean, we don't have the JFK files.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you ask, like, why don't we? Who is being protected here? There are no living stakeholders in that story. There's no living participant in that murder conspiracy. It was a conspiracy. We know that. So who were the participants in that conspiracy? Well, no one's still alive. So who could we possibly be protecting?
Well, that's a good question, and I think the answer is clear. It's the institutions that had, a stake in the corruption, had a major role in the corruption that ended JFK's life. We know even from the documents that were released that the CIA played a major role in tracking Lee Harvey Oswald beyond what they had originally said, that information of wiretapping Oswald was withheld from the Warren Commission, that James Angleton played a much more major role in that wiretapping than we ever knew before, that James Angleton, the same CIA operative, also had a special relationship with the director to work on special projects, and he maintained the U.S. relationship with Israeli intelligence. Like, he was the biggest catalyst for that relationship. He essentially owned it on the American side. And that the CIA engaged in more, schemes to assassinate foreign leaders, Rafael Trujillo specifically in the Dominican Republic, than we knew. And if the American people knew about the corrupt institutions that govern the deep state, they would be much more apt to call for their dissolution, call for their abolishment, and that's who they're protecting. It's not necessarily a single figure. Those single figures are just figureheads in a mass machine that's a systematic issue. And the systematic corruption and the regime change and propaganda apparatus, it's institutionalized in the deep state.
By not releasing all of those files, and that's a pretty short list of suspects. So I think we kind of know what that is, at least in part. I don't know the details. I know some, but I think it's pretty obvious. Same with Epstein. It's pretty clear who some of the players were. They were governments, the U.S. government involved, British government involved, Israeli government involved at various levels. The guy lived a fairly long life. He died in his mid-60s. He was pretty active in government work, arms trading, for example, from a young age, from his late 20s, I think, when he left Bear Stearns.
This is true. He got in bed with arms traffickers like Douglas Lease and Adnan Khashoggi, who was one of his clients for a time. Adnan Khashoggi playing a major role in the Israel side of Iran-Contra, because if you remember, if you were alive at that time, the arms went from the United States to Israel as a conduit, and then from Israel to Iran. And it was that way because it was prohibited by law for the U.S. to send to Iran those arms directly. And Adnan Khashoggi, the consummate Saudi playboy, played a role in that. And Epstein linked up with those guys, probably, from what we can glean from the information that is available, because of his money laundering skills that were a part of those arms trafficking processes as well.
He got into that business with Robert Maxwell. You don't trade arms by yourself. You do it on behalf of governments and with the assistance of governments. Obviously, you've been around this, So from that age, from say 30 to 65-ish when he died, so 35 years, he's intersecting with governments. It's not just the Israelis. I mean, the Israelis were definitely involved. Ehud Barak is living at his house. Okay? And we have a lot of his emails that prove that, and I'm not defending the Israeli government, which is hard to defend, but I'm just trying to tell the truth, which is it's not just the Israelis, okay? It's us, it's the British, the French, it's the usual players, the intel services that matter in the West, and probably others. So that's who's being protected, of course, and then all kinds of other pawns.
Yeah, I agree with this. The evidence shows that clearly. There's like a 7-part investigation by the heroic journalists at Drop Site News, Murtaza Hussein and Ryan Grimm on this. Epstein worked on behalf of the Israeli government. It's totally undeniable at this point. He arranged security agreements between Israel and the Ivory Coast, between Israel and Mongolia. You can see this from the leaked email exchanges. He set up wire transfers to one of Israel's most prominent spies. We can see in the leaked email address him confirming the bank accounts to this spy, Yoni Koren, who, by the way, also lived with them for a time. He set up a back channel between Putin and himself to figure out how they could financially prosper under the Syrian civil war that had the U.S. help depose Assad for the sake of al-Qaeda, set up back channel negotiations, brokered that organization of peoples to try to profit from this. We know that there's more, including him trying to solicit funds from the Rothschilds Bank to support Israel's cyber weapon warfare. This is all part of their stories. It's very substantiated, and yet that lead's totally buried. The corporate media isn't talking about it at all. Very few people in the independent media are talking about it, but it is corroborated.
And so I think one of the main takeaways from that story, about which I know a lot, but not everything, is that the leaders that we believe are leaders, and people are starting to get this, like our elected officials, oh, they have so much power, or Senator so-and-so, President, what's his name? You know, like these are the people running our society, are not the people running our society. Of course, they themselves are subject to enormous pressures from, you know, other people and coalitions of people and forces and interests. And like, that's what they're, and the closer you get to them, the more time you spend with the people who are in charge, the more you realize they're not really in charge. One of the things we've learned is that the people who are really kind of running America's foreign policy, whether it's Lindsey Graham or whomever, these people are not geniuses at all. Like they're dumb. They're dumb. They're just mediocre.
They are. They're manipulators. That's all they do. They play a role to extract money from the U.S. populace and send it to their cronies in Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, and Israel, of course. And that's their job. They perform that job, some of them for 3 or 4 decades, like Lindsey Graham, right? Like Mitch McConnell. They've been doing this for their entire life. It's their career to do this, to redistribute funds from the working class in America to the politically connected elites, and do it while propagandizing it for different reasons, to support democracy, because it's for the children. It'll help flourish. You know, it'll help people flourish around the world. It'll safeguard American interests, but Americans are seeing through that.
Jeffrey Epstein is my favorite example. Because Jeffrey Epstein lived his life basically in the shadows, like you couldn't really know where the money, you still don't know where the money came from, or like, what's the goal of this? What is this? You can't know because it's all secret. Classified, national security, da, 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 da. You start to assume that Jeffrey Epstein is this like Svengali, and he's a genius, and he's controlling everything. And then you read his emails. He's like a fucking moron from Staten Island who can barely speak English. He's like dumb. He's totally impressed by Harvard. He went to Cooper Union. He's impressed by Harvard because the brand name impresses him. It's like wearing a polo shirt with a horse on it. He thinks that's cool. He's totally unsophisticated, actually.
Well, I'll somewhat disagree with this. So I've spent over 20 hours analyzing individual Epstein emails from these recent leaks, not only Ehud Barak's emails that got leaked and had a lot of Epstein's in there, but the ones from the House Oversight Committee. And I agree with Tucker. There is unsophistication in terms of his writing. He was a horrible writer, spelled everything wrong, terrible at sometimes in kind of conveying his thoughts. But also a lot of the evidence behind the emails, like we knew about even before this, shows that he was sophisticated in money laundering, and that's how he made his career at Bear Stearns. And, you know, his mission at first was to be an options trader on the options desk, not an actual trader, but sitting alongside one. Didn't succeed in that, so he was moved into a different unit that worked on, you know, working with clients to launder money to other places to save them in terms of taxes, trying to do that legally. But in the process, he learned a lot about that. And as Whitney Webb puts in One Nation Under Blackmail, he wasn't just an idiot stooge in this regard. He actually did succeed in that. And that's why figures from the deep underbelly of the intelligence community did want to reach out to him. That's why he was on a jet with Douglas Leese to the Pentagon just after he left Bear Stearns. So partially agree, partially disagree.
And not smart at all. He's crafty. He's got high canine and animal intelligence, but he's not a genius at all. He's a dummy. He's a thug. And that has been like kind of amazing to see. His only real advantage is that he's evil. He'll do anything. He's got just no limits at all. Like, you need to kill someone? We'll do that. If we have to, we'll do that. And that person, the unscrupulous person, does have an advantage because there are no boundaries, right? So if your goal is to get rich or powerful, you can get there faster if you'll do anything to get there. Doesn't end well, ever. Didn't end well with him. But that's really what I learned, is that the people who are mad at me call me names because that's literally all they can do. Shut up! You can't speak at that event. We don't want you on stage. We're deplatforming you. Okay, I don't care really, but like,
who's saying that to you?
Oh, yeah, I mean,
no, I mean, what do
I don't even want to go through. I don't want to make it about me. Because I'm certainly not oppressed, and you haven't impressed my spirit. You could fucking shoot me. I'm not going to impress my spirit.
Well, I hope that's true. I'm glad Tucker's told the truth about this, and he's told it for months and months, including at that Turning Point USA event, where he stood up there and said, you know, Epstein was likely working for Israel. Before we had complete undeniable proof in the terms of these emails, he was saying that, and that had attracted the mass anger of Zionist donors to Turning Point USA. So I'm really glad they won't destroy his spirits. I'm also with him in that statement at the end there where, you know, Epstein did have a lack of moral boundaries. And when it comes to people that have a lack of moral boundaries, they aren't, you know, bound by the same constraints you and I would be. He was willing to do whatever it took to, you know, get off on this sick and twisted, you know, compelling force in his own mind, and just completely disregard the rights and innocence of other human beings to do that by the dozens. Even in his first trial, not a first trial, his first case in Florida, there was over 40 witnesses stacked against him. And then he got that sweetheart deal, which, by the way, the DOJ then actually apologized for later. And Acosta said, well, I was told he was intelligence and to lay off him. We know that. That's part of the documented record. Acosta said he doesn't. Now he says he never said that, but we know from the Trump transition meeting minutes that he did say that, because the Trump transition team later then made him the Secretary of Labor. It's just so absurd. I do disagree to some extent with Tucker as far as the sophistication of Epstein, at least in the realm of money laundering. He was proficient. We have a lot of evidence of that. But in terms of how he talked about other issues, certainly he was unsophisticated in those emails. He couldn't even spell or write properly. And some of his comments just... What jumps out the page on some of those comments is just such bitterness toward every other person around him, except if they were like the New York Times journalists that were corresponding with him, and including Landon Thomas and Michael Wolff, who he talked about, hey, how can we get blackmail on Trump? He hated Trump in the end. Absolutely. But he was corresponding with Bannon. Bannon was one of his closest compatriots all the way up until the end. Another angle to this story that's being completely buried. So yeah, Epstein was involved with Israel. It is a slam door case. You can read all about that on Drop Site News, that series that Murtaza Hussein and Ryan Grimm have. Like I said, if there was a world where true journalism reigned, that would be the leading story. Wall-to-wall coverage over Epstein's ironclad and undeniable associations to Israel that most Americans have no idea about. They haven't followed this. And I don't think we're going to get true disclosures out of these Epstein releases. I wish we were. Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ro Khanna fought like hell for it. Marjorie Taylor Greene was called Marjorie Trader Greene for it, of course, and then resigned. I hated to see that, especially the kind of pressure that was put toward her that she was going to then resign. It almost like shows that this is just going to happen to other people that try to buck the system and actually try to unveil transparency in these issues at great risk to themselves, even when they stand alone against not a popular president right now amongst the American populace, but a popular president right now among the Republicans in Congress, her biggest political triumph. Massey's the only one that suffered these slings and arrows for so many years without apparently letting it get to him. And that's not to put Marjorie Taylor Greene down, because I would not want to put up with these slings and arrows. But I don't think we're going to see transparency in this case, unfortunately. But let's be real. We already know a lot of the connections. And they're the connections that the state most doesn't want us to know. And they're buried as the lead to the story, which it should be. But what do you guys think? Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? Let me know in the comments down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also, if you like this video, please consider joining as a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button down below. And if you do that, you can gain access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube, and I'll really appreciate your support. You'll be able to see those members-only videos right away. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. It'll shoot you to a site. You just plug in your email. I'll send you a copy in PDF form of that book, free of charge, no obligation, just because I appreciate you viewing the channel. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.